All right, let's just jump right into this explainer and demystify the immense regulatory and ethical responsibilities behind modern medical advancements. We usually picture scientists in white coats staring into microscopes, right? But there is this entire, highly regulated world of clinical trials that happens way before a breakthrough drug ever reaches the public. Today, we're looking at the exact intersection where strict compliance meets compassionate care. But before we get bogged down in all the heavy regulatory requirements of these studies, we have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. When human lives and scientific integrity are actually on the line, where does the buck finally stop? I mean, in an environment completely filled with clinical research coordinators, sponsors, monitors, and institutional review boards, someone has to be the final anchor. Someone has to take the ultimate legal and ethical ownership of the trial's outcome at any given site. Well, that person is the principal investigator, or as you'll often hear them called, the PI. Think of the PI as the captain of the ship. They are the responsible leader of the entire team at a trial site. As our source material points out, if a trial is being conducted by a whole team of people, this one individual takes the mantle of principal investigator. Basically, if something goes wrong, they are the ultimate solution and the primary safeguard against adverse events and protocol deviations. They're legally accountable and they are ethically bound to the subjects. Now, clinical research guidelines can be, honestly, pretty dense. So to make sense of it all, we've broken this explainer down into 6 clear sections. 1. Meeting the PI. 2. Qualifications and resources. 3. Operational and legal duties. 4. Medical care and ethics. 5. Mastering informed consent. And finally, 6. Continuous trial oversight. Let's get right into it. Moving on to Section 2. Qualifications and essential resources. So what's actually super interesting here is that just having a fancy medical degree and some training, that is not enough. A PI has to command real, tangible resources to even be considered for the role. The monitor who selects the investigator evaluates whether they have the physical infrastructure to execute the trial safely. It's like a giant logistical puzzle, just as much as a medical one. It really isn't just about clinical know-how. Operationally, a PI must prove they can actually recruit suitable subjects, arrange enough qualified staff, and secure the right physical facilities. But perhaps the most important, and frankly surprising requirement, is that they must prove they have the time. If they can't dedicate sufficient hours in the day to oversee the team, the whole structure just completely crumbles. All right, let's look at Section 3, Operational and Legal Duties. Let me tell you, the PI carries a massive legal burden. Before a trial can even begin, they have to secure written and dated approval from the Institutional Review Board, the IRB, and the Independent Ethics Committee, the IEC. They personally validate the protocol, they execute Form 1572 filings, and here is the absolute golden rule. They must ensure strict compliance with absolutely no deviations from the approved protocol. None. Unless, of course, they get prior agreement from the sponsor and the review boards. And operationally, they're on the hook for the investigational product, or the IP. We're talking about the hardcore tracking of the trial drug. The PI has to maintain rigorous records proving that every single dose is accounted for, from the moment it's delivered to the site, through the inventory process, to the patient's actual use, all the way to its safe return or documented destruction. Imagine having to literally account for every single pill in a massive facility. Nothing can slip through the cracks. So, what actually happens if a patient gets sick during a trial? That brings us to Section 4, Medical Care and Ethics. This comparison right here brilliantly illustrates the profound shift in a PI's mindset. On one hand, you have the super rigid operational logistics of counting pills and managing inventory. But then, on the other hand, you have to transition to the ethical mandate of protecting human lives. The PI stands right in the middle of all of that, perfectly balancing strict compliance with deep compassion. The trial guidelines are crystal clear here. The PI is responsible for all trial-related medical decisions. They absolutely must ensure that adequate medical care is provided to a subject for any adverse event or adverse drug reaction related to the trial. Furthermore, if a subject has a primary physician, and they want that doctor to be informed about their participation or any health problems that pop up, it is the explicit duty of the investigator to communicate with that primary doctor. Which leads us straight into Section 5, Mastering Informed Consent. The crucial point to remember here is that consent is not about protecting the institution with a bunch of confusing legal jargon. It's about genuine human understanding. The guidelines explicitly state that the language has to be non-technical and understandable to the subject. It must never, ever coerce or unduly influence someone to participate. The ultimate goal is complete, transparent comprehension. When you distill all those heavy regulatory checklists down, it basically comes to this. Subjects have to fully understand exactly what they are signing up for. They need to know the duration of the study, any invasive procedures, foreseeable risks, and the expected benefits. They need to know who has access to their private records. And above all, it must be stated clearly that participation is strictly voluntary. They can walk away at any time, totally penalty-free. To actually execute this in the real world, the PI or their delegated staff has to follow some very rigid steps. First, the subject must be given ample time to ask questions, no rushing them. Then, the subject signs and personally dates the informed consent form. And here is the absolutely critical sequence. This signature and date must be captured prior to the initiation of a single trial procedure. Not during the trial, not after, before. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, Continuous Trial Oversight. Because, this intense level of oversight, it's a continuous, nonstop life cycle. From planning the study during the pretrial phase, through routine execution and those regular monitoring visits, all the way to the site closeout visits and final reports. The PI's vigilance literally never tapers off. If anything, it just intensifies as the study matures. I think this quote sums it up perfectly. The PI isn't just a manager. They are the ethical and operational conscience of the entire trial. At the end of the day, their role stands at the exact intersection of strict regulatory compliance and the profound care of human beings. It is an incredibly demanding role, for sure. It requires this unique blend of medical expertise, legal precision, and deep empathy. But it's also deeply rewarding. I really hope this explainer leaves you wondering if you or someone you know could be the kind of guardian that future medical breakthroughs absolutely rely on. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of the Principal Investigator.